And I just want to sort of have you discuss for a minute about services and the expansion of services, because I think the impression might be left from your presentation and your answers to questions today that the entirety of where we are on the operating side, and we'll get to capital, is because of decisions made to restrain the growth in property taxes, and there's been no contribution from the fact that council meeting after council meeting for the same decade you refer to, people have, without any thought of how it could be paid for, increased services.
So I apologize, Mayor, if I left that impression. Gwen, I don't know if you want to put up the slide. I think it's the fourth or fifth slide. But basically, it is very clear that over time, expense has grown. Well, it's grown moderately. It's grown as a function of basic core cost drivers, inflationary, and then council's desire to, that one right there, council's desire to add incremental spend over time.
And even in the last number of years, because the one just flashed up there that you might just put back up for a second that showed the 2.5, even there, on those years between 11 and 16, there has been an increase that I guess in most of those years has run above the rate of inflation. Is that correct?
Probably right about the rate of inflation.
About or above. Yeah. Last year was 2.3, or this year, and it's growing at 2.5. Now, you also, I think one might have been excused if they were left with the impression in your earlier answers that there are really no efficiencies, and you kind of amended that a little bit earlier, just a couple of minutes ago, to one of the councillors over here. But I'm assuming you'd agree that through things like technology, review of span of control, review of who does what, meaning what role government plays, that there, I mean, in a government of $14 billion in total for everything, that there must be not only just tiny things that can be done better, but substantial things that can be done better. I mean, in any organization that has $14 billion of expenditures and what, 10 or 11 billion dollars in revenues.
So there are so expenditure control does work. The City of Toronto has had annual targets. They have generally provided savings, and certainly offset. It is certainly my view that there are incremental opportunities for savings, and we will realize that. The only concern I have is that Council not assume that the totality of the fiscal challenge can be bridged on the basis of efficiencies alone. I do believe that efficiencies are available and will continue to be realized. The only other challenge I'll put on that is that this conversation around efficiencies needs to be broadened to include the agencies as well, and they are the proximate source of pressure going forward.
Okay, well that certainly clarifies that. Now, speaking of revenues, you said earlier on that, and I wanted to make sure we all understood again, I don't think people should be left with a misleading impression, that we had incurred all of these expenditures. I wasn't sure whether you were talking about the operating that you've made reference to recently in the last few minutes on the TTC side, or whether you were talking about this list of capital projects, because I think many of these capital projects, in fact, the expenditures have not been incurred, they've not been approved by the Council. They've been approved, as you said earlier, for some work to be done, but that's a far cry from approving a budget. So are we talking operating or capital when you made that expression that we've incurred? What you said was we've incurred these expenditures and we should have raised taxes at that time when we incurred the expenditures, but in fact a lot of them aren't incurred.
So if I can just jump to to slide 11. So these represent expenditures that have already been committed. So these are base operations. When we say base capital, that's the existing capital projects. The whatever share of $29 billion, whatever fraction of that were brought forward, would then be incremental to these numbers. So this is essentially the pressure for the 2016 level of services carried forward into 2017 and out years.
But you would agree that, say, that 419, as it has every single year, well, I realize there are numbers in there that seem intractable, that number is going to come down. I think you suggested that yourself earlier.
It will absolutely come down. It will absolutely come down substantially. What I'm concerned about is that there are two elements of it, TTC and TCHC, that as a result of my conversations with the agencies, it seems like it's less likely to come down than some of the pressures, some of the inflationary pressures that the city divisions have traditionally been able to strangle.
All right, and my final question is simply this. One could have concluded, listening earlier on, that you felt that the property tax and increasing the property tax and property taxes that should have been increased in prior years and so on and so forth was the only way in which to deal with this. And I'm assuming, given that you're bringing forward a report on revenues, including some that I assume will have substantial potential revenue impact, that you are not, in fact, saying that this has to be done through the property tax.
Not by any means. And to be very clear, I respect and understand the will of Council, and I understand clearly that Council has placed a very high priority on maintaining property tax rates at a low level and maintaining property tax consistent with or even below the rate of inflation. That's true historically. It's likely to be true going forward as well. What I'm emphasizing in the report is that we will be able to make some savings. They will not be sufficient. Therefore, some mix of revenue tools, revenue measures that can be within the City of Toronto Act, that can be incremental to the City of Toronto Act, that can be a combination of asset optimization and others. But the time has come for a robust dialogue on those as well.
Thank you very much. My time is exhausted.